Now, the Legal Practitioners Fidelity Fund has unveiled a new initiative to empower communities and tackle legal misconduct. Since 2018, 57 attorneys have been disbarred for misconduct, with some stealing between 1.5 million rand and 5 million rand from unsuspecting clients. According to the Legal Practitioners Fidelity Fund, these abuses erode faith in the legal system. The LPFF says it's raising awareness, publicity, transparently and community by community. But what does that all mean? To explain more, we're joined now by the Legal Practitioners Fidelity Fund CEO, Motlatsi Molefe. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, looking at the numbers, since 2018, at least 57 attorneys have been disbarred for misconduct. I mean, do you believe this represents only the tip of the iceberg, or is it merely a reflection of the true scale of a much bigger problem?
Well, good evening to you and to your viewers. I think it is important to understand that we believe that this is in fact a tip of the iceberg. The reality is that even as we phrase it as such, we also need to take into account that it is really a minority of practitioners who find themselves in behavior like that in a profession that constitutes probably more than 40,000 practitioners in the country. But their behavior, by virtue of the fact that it is actually reported on widely and commented upon, given the nature of the profession and how it is supposed to be ethical, tends to create the impression that this is a majority of practitioners when only a few are involved, but they actually have everyone tied with the same brush. That does not dismiss the fact that they actually are one too many in conducting themselves in a manner that is unacceptable and unethical.
And as you speak about this, Mr. Molefe, speaking about how it's a minority of professionals, what trends are you seeing in the types of misconduct that is being reported, especially around the trust of funds versus poor legal representation, if we just have to look at the similarities or dissimilarities there?
Well, the typical trend that you see over the years relates to conveyancing transactions, and that's basically the transactions that involve the buying and selling of property. And this is really not a South African issue, it's worldwide. But in South Africa, it's also fueled by ignorance or illiteracy because people do not know what their rights are. Then the second trend that we also see relates to road accident fund claims. Again, that's fueled either by illiteracy or lack of knowledge. So our view, or at least the view that the board has taken as the LPFF, is that we need to go to communities to actually tell them what they should look out for in relation to matters of this nature and how they should actually position themselves in order to protect themselves against unethical conduct that is involved in matters of this nature.
Some critics may argue that oversight mechanisms like the Legal Practice Council have been too reactive rather than proactive, as you speak about how people don't know what their rights are. What is your take on that?
Well, it is true. I think the problem with regulation in South Africa is that it has tended to fall behind in terms of trends and be very, very reactive instead of being proactive. But I think we are actually moving in the direction of ensuring that, as a rule, such matters be highlighted to the public so that the public also assists us and the regulators to ensure that risk is managed at an early stage, which is why we've gone out of our way to start a campaign where we're talking to communities to say, be aware of your rights. These are the things you need to do in the event you're suspicious of certain conduct that you think might be unethical on the part of your practitioner.
Why do you think rural and perhaps poorer communities disproportionately affected by dishonest attorneys as we look at the bigger impact and look at some of the vulnerabilities?
I think it's more about being further and further away from education. One of the biggest problems that you have is that the nature of the relationship between the practitioner and the client is distorted. The client believes that they are disempowered. They cannot ask the practitioner for certain information. Just to make a simple example, when you deal with a practitioner, you ought to know that this practitioner is a practitioner who's in good standing with the regulator. And the only way to verify that is to check whether he's got a valid Fidelity Fund certificate. That's the starting point. And the Fidelity Fund certificate is valid for the year in which it was issued. So in essence, in 2025, a Fidelity Fund certificate is valid from the 1st of Jan to the 31st of December 2025. And people probably do not know that that certificate is what actually allows a practitioner to hold money in trust or to receive money and property in trust on their behalf. So bottom line is, that's the first thing to check. Is he in good standing or is she in good standing?
Yes.
If they are not, they ought to be avoided at all costs.
And very quickly, before we let you go, how does misconduct by the minority of lawyers that you speak to affect the overall credibility of the legal profession in South Africa?
Well, it's a reputational issue, first and foremost.
Yeah.
The public ought to know that they are dealing with people who are credible, who actually can be trusted. Other than that, the public ought to know that the Fidelity Fund is there to ensure that they are not left out of pocket in the event a practitioner, for instance, steals their money or their property. Obviously, we are a creature of statute and operate within certain limitations that are imposed on us by statute. And unfortunately, the narrative out there is that we can actually reimburse any amount, but legally, at this point, we're only restricted to reimbursing a figure of 5 million rands as a total amount that we can in relation to any single claim. But the reality is that people ought to know that we are available in order to be able to deal with such things where they happen. And that is unfortunate because we don't think that there should be any practitioner who steals from the public.
Very well. Thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. Legal Practitioners Fidelity Fund CEO Motlatsi Molefe.